Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for January 16th, 2018. Madam Clerk.
We have one closed session agenda item. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, conference with labor negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to closed session. Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for January 16, 2018. Shall we all stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can you report out for us on the closed session?
Report of closed session. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, conference with labor negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations. There was no action taken. However, the item will be left open throughout the day.
Thank you. Now time for announcements. Does any board member or staff member have any announcements they'd like to tell us about? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, public comment. Madam Clerk.
Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Marty Crane, Valley Springs. So I'm still terribly disappointed in the disrespect that was shown to not only Supervisor Garamendi, but all of District 2 in the process by which the chairmanship was selected. It's just like what happened on January 5th of 2015 when Supervisor Edson did it. So we didn't like it then. We're not crazy about it now. I also wanted to say that I notice on today's agenda there are 6 items, and they are all appeals to the Planning Commission denials for cannabis grows. And I'm just wondering how it is that, considering that these people have a right to a fair hearing, appeal hearing, how are they going to get that from this board when this board just now voted a ban? I'm not sure. It doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel right, and I don't see how you can proceed with this. Thank you.
I'm here to talk about the ban. My name's Mark Miller, and we have a family farm out in Mountain Ranch. It's a registered farm. We lost everything in the Butte fire, except for a metal building that we all wished would have burned down. As a family, we decided to spend our construction money locally in order to support the the greater good of the community, hundreds of thousands of dollars, as you can imagine. Our moral compass urged us to do so. Now, a reasonable person would expect the Board of Supervisors to also serve the greater good of the community, to support local businesses, to encourage economic development, to increase the health and welfare of the community by funding the Sheriff's Department and employing sufficient numbers of people in county government in order to serve the public. However, the recent Board of Supervisors decision to ban commercial cannabis does the opposite. In fact, the decision could prove to be more destructive than the Butte fire. It's as if my family farm is about to burn down a second time. This is true of hundreds of people in the farming community. We are being harmed by the Board of Supervisors. Rather than serving the greater good of the community, the Board of Supervisors has lit a fire, harming thousands of people. Local lumber yards and hardware stores will suffer. Charitable organizations that depend on donations will suffer. Churches will suffer. Schools will suffer. Roads will deteriorate. Restaurants will close. Contractors will go out of business. The sheriff won't be able to serve and protect the people adequately. On top of that, you put the county in a position to get sued into bankruptcy. But this you already know. Unbelievably, you already know. You managed to come up with a ruling that clearly harms the greater good of the community. Clearly, the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors, I lost my place. Clearly, the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors lacks the moral compass and the wisdom to serve our community in a positive manner. And now you're about to shirk your responsibility by sending the measure back to the voters rather than doing the hard work of compromise. I'm asking the board today to undo your ban and craft a measure that supports the greater good of Calaveras County. Because in the end, the greater good of the people is more important than your personal ideologies.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Joanna Ottman, District 2, and I came specifically this morning to address the issue of the chairmanship of the board. Just to let you know how important I felt it was, I needed to move an appointment this morning and drive 30 minutes in the opposite direction from my office just to be here to speak about this. I think there are two things that came to mind when I read the information about this, and the first is, it just looks very manipulative. It looks unfair, if not outright corrupt. It's not democratic. I think that I understand that there's no law about rotation, but I think there could be a policy. I think it's fair. You are all here as supervisors, not just for your district, not just for yourselves, but for the whole county. And it shows a distinct lack of respect. I've seen this, I've personally observed in meetings this year as well as other years, a real disrespect for our representative. And I just want to underscore that when you disrespect a supervisor, you're also disrespecting that district that representative is here for. I'd really like you to just examine how you behave and the kind of comportment that goes on that is certainly, I would think, on a personal level, could be very demoralizing. And for all the rest of us watching, you know, it's really, really disappointing. So I urge you to relook at this and perhaps develop a policy that's fair to every district to rotate the chairmanship and not just manipulate things to your own ends. Thank you.
Good morning, Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. Addressed a couple of incidents last week. The woman who lost control actually accosted me a year and a half ago in the lobby. grabbed me by the arm and put her finger in my face and wouldn't let me leave. So just for history's sake. And second, I do not live in District 2. Jack Garamendi is not my supervisor. Gary Toffanelli is. And I'm really disappointed, Gary, you didn't call me this week, because I could have resolved this with you rather than bring it up now. But last week you came up to me and you said, Bonnie, I want you to know I was not part of a conspiracy. You either didn't hear what I said or you ignored it, because what I said was, Gary, I don't blame you. You didn't vote for it. I thought it was these 3 people that voted for it, but you voted for yourself. I'm so disappointed. I mean, you know why I didn't vote for Cliff Edson? It wasn't because of any of the issues about the asphalt or the olive orchard. It was because those people stooped so low and manipulated Cliff Edson into a second year as chair that I could not support him, and I like him as a person. That's why I voted for you. Now you've done the same thing. We see you people acting. Once in a while you react, and then we know what your true character is like. We saw 2 supervisors last week lash out at members of the public for speaking their truth, and I talked about suing Mr. Clapp for slander. I did talk to an attorney, and he doesn't handle this, but he said, don't bother with Clyde Clapp and Janet Clark. Go after the county. They must have some liability for the actions of their leaders. And the guy doesn't know Calaveras County, because he said, well, go for the county. That's where the money is. Well, we know Calaveras County. That's where the money isn't. So in spite of that, I may continue my action in defending my character and my name as besmirched by Mr. Clapp in this forum. And if I do sue the county, I'm sorry, you will all maybe be subpoenaed as witnesses, because you all saw what he did to me at that time.
Good morning, gentlemen. Bill Wilson, District 1. I come before you, and I'm very disappointed. I'm glad I was sick last week, actually, because it just made me sicker when I watched you gentlemen on my computer. But I could yell, and I could scream, and I could say you're a bunch of, which you were. I've never known that I would see a group of elected officials support unregulated, illegal cannabis in a county that had regulated. We came together. We had a plan. We have taxes. We have money that came in from those taxes. You, Mr. Toffanelli, demanded that you get your way or you were going to ban. Well, you got your way, you banned. And you, Mr. Mills, and you, Mr. Clapp, you've gotten your way. I'm sorry, Mr. Oliveira and Mr. Garamendi, that common sense, reality doesn't seem to work with the other 3. Saturday, there was a threat. People were told they had less than 10 minutes to live because somebody pushed the wrong button. The missile had already hit Calaveras County. And now we have nothing but illegal, unregulated cannabis that you people are never going to stop. You've never stopped it before, and your actions only support them. You have harmed everyone that came into this board. There's another 5 or 6 people on the agenda today that you're going to deny. There's no question about it. No matter what it was. They didn't get a piece of paper in on time. The sheriff didn't like the way they answered the question, have you ever been arrested or accosted by a police officer in your life? I'm sorry, that's not what the state has as regulation. They ask what you've been convicted of, not what some cop pulled you over for and asked you, well, by God, I think you were going 45 and a 25. You're going to do 3 days in Santa Rita because we have a judge that does that here. No, gentlemen, I'm very disappointed in this whole mess that you people have made. You had a way of doing it. You could have brought together the community and worked out regulation that works for everybody. No. Let's support the illegal growers. Yeah. Let's support illegal operations and environmental damage to the community. Your silent poison, sir, you're going to get it. Not by the regulated people.
Can we hold on 1 second? Can everybody please make sure their phones are off in the chambers? Thank you.
William Hand, District 2. I'm in support of legal, regulated cannabis, not illegal cannabis by cartels and all the people that they're afraid of, and we really don't want around. I want to tell you a little bit about what cannabis is and why it's illegal. A lot of people don't understand the story behind it. Documentary called "A Emperor Wears No Clothes" and other various internet sources I have read. Back in Prohibition, Attorney General Anslinger, he is the one that was losing the war on Prohibition. He had a friend called Hearst. He had a friend called DuPont. Hearst had paper and forestry that could make the paper. DuPont had coal mills that if you burn the stalks of hemp, which grows naturally down in the South during the time, oh, and by the way, the Constitution is written on, and if you owned land back in the Revolutionary Day, you were required to grow hemp. But getting back to my story, if you burn the stalks of cannabis, it can burn as hot as coal, and it's renewable energy. So Hearst saw a threat to his paper empire, DuPont saw a threat to his coal empire, and Attorney General Anslinger saw he was losing control on Prohibition. So he crafted a thought saying that, well, if the black men smoke marijuana down in the South, they're going to rape the white women. Fact. So with the ear being pulled by Hearst and the ear being pulled by DuPont, Attorney General Anslinger went to Congress and said, we need to make cannabis illegal. And thus, the marijuana stamp tax ordinance was put in place into the Constitution. Now, are we talking about a Class 1 drug here? I mean, really, as bad as heroin, as bad as meth, as bad as the other things? I mean, think about the story I just told you that was actual fact, documentary. That's how marijuana, pot, weed, or what I like to call cannabis, that's how it was made illegal. And we're talking about this for the past 2 years, for the past 2, 3, 4 decades, and it was really nothing more than a gateway drug. That cigarettes, that alcohol, that any other drug. You have to have an addictive personality to have it as a gateway drug. Addictive personalities do not have the willpower. But check out what Portugal and what Uruguay are doing when they made everything illegal. Imagine what drugs became not so
Thank
bad. Okay?
Good morning, Vicki Reinke, Angels Camp. I just wanted to address some of the comments that were made and what I've been reading in the newspaper, and that is about the lawsuits. I don't know if you recall, but over the last couple of years, I've written letters to the editor talking about lawsuits, and it's just me, and I see lawsuits sometimes as just bullying people, trying to get them to do something you want, and we don't appreciate that. And the people that live here in Calaveras County don't appreciate that. And guess what? When you sue the county, you're suing all of us. And so I just want to make that clear. And it doesn't help a cause when people are out suing. I suppose our side could start suing as well. But that's not really the first thing we would think to do, but that's the first thing that we get out of the marijuana industry. And it's been going on for 2 years. If you recall back all the things that have already been done by the marijuana, we don't want to live that way. So that's just another reason. And I'm not casting dispersion. This is a fact. Look it up. There's been threats of lawsuits, and there have been lawsuits filed. That's all I want to say, and that's on all the people of Calaveras County. Thank you.
Bob Howerman, District 5, resident for, I keep saying 17 years, we're rolling on 18 years. I'm also Executive Director for Calaveras Normal, National Organization for Reforming Marijuana Laws. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to reform marijuana laws here. We're not done yet. You need to do something. You need to inspect what you expect, because what you expected isn't going to happen. The young lady up before was talking about lawsuits. Unfortunately, that is the only way, legal way, people are going to save their livelihoods. And it's unfortunate because everybody does have to pay for it. There's a couple of things happening. I'm sure you're aware of the class action suit, and that which will force the county, and I've looked into it. I was against it, but I can't say I'm against it anymore, which will force the county to actually return the Measure C money, all of it. That's on you, not the farmers. I'm sure you've seen in the news where some of the farmers are actually burning their crops. Those are Calaveras County farmers, because they have no choice. They can't get their state licenses now because of you. And therefore, their only other option is the black market. These people are honest, good, solid people. They're not dealing with the black market. They're burning their crops. Looking into that just a little bit further, there is a way out for them. Hate lawsuits, but there's a precedent throughout the state of what's happening in the different courts. The county is going to have to buy their crops because it's your fault they couldn't sell it. Probably didn't think of that. You really, really do need to inspect what you expect, because it's not going to be what you thought it was. I love this county, and I hate to see this happening, but it's not anyone's fault but yours. It is on you.
Morning, Board. Tom Griffin, District 2. As were many people from a lot of districts, I was really upset at watching my district supervisor not receive the chair position after being in the vice chair 4 out of 4 consecutive years. Not Jack, but my district representative. And I was struck by the fact that it looked to me like voting for yourself for a chair position that involves an increase in salary would be a conflict of interest. So last night, I wrote to the FPPC and asked them this question, which reads as follows. I wrote to advice@FPPC. Should a member of a Board of Supervisors recuse him or herself from voting on their own election as board chair when the position involves a significant salary increase? Thank you, Tom Griffin. While I was just sitting outside 4 minutes before the board convened, they responded, "Dear Mr. Griffin, we do not provide third-party advice or advice relating to past conduct. I can, however, provide general guidance on the rules that apply to the scenario you have described. Regulation 18704, Section D, Item 3, provides that a public official may participate in actions by a public official relating to his or her compensation or the terms or condition of his or her employment or consulting contract. However, an official may not make a decision to appoint, hire, fire, promote, demote, or suspend without pay or take disciplinary action with financial sanction against the official or his or her immediate family, or set a salary for the official or his or her immediate family different from salaries paid to other employees or the government agency in the same job classification or position. The decision you described would involve a member of the Board of Supervisors voting to promote themselves to the chair. Therefore, under this regulation, that would be prohibited. Suki K. Barr, Senior Commission Counsel from the FPPC. So I just wanted to pass that along. Thank you much.
I'm rising on a point of order. I think this is a time for you guys to go back in the back room and have a discussion about this. I don't think Mr. Tofinelli should be chairing any meetings. Clearly, conflict of interest. He voted to give himself a raise. I think you guys need to go back, work it out, come back. And I think Jack Garamendi should be the chair when you come back. I do believe I get a ruling on that, correct, County Council?
Yeah, the chair should respect the point of order.
County Council? Yes.
So when the board makes their assignments at their first meeting of the year, so whether they're appointed to LAFCO or COG or any group, including the chair of the Board of Supervisors, when the board votes on that, we are required to complete a form from the FPPC. It's called a Form 806. You will see on our website that the past years are on there. I have just not posted it yet, but it is listed there that the board chair votes and that any member of the board votes, that any member of the board votes to assign themselves to something that they receive any kind of dollar compensation for. So we do disclose that as we're required.
However, we have a letter from the FPPC that expressly says this is a conflict of interest. So we want to be clear. If nothing is done here, the whole county is responsible. The whole county government is responsible for this outrage. You can't, if you let it stand.
We heard your point of order. Thank you, Rapana. Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I make a recommendation that we take a break and let council research this so we can settle this issue right?
Let's finish public comment here. This will be our last speaker, so. It'll be 30 minutes after this speaker, so.
Good morning. Every morning I tell my sons, I love you, drive careful. In the cannabis community, it's often said, be safe. Last week, I've got two computers. One I can watch the BOS meeting on, the other one I can watch for comments. Listening to the remarks that I heard from behind the speaker, that you could hear all the way up here into this microphone, they were very disrespectful. I didn't think that was allowed here. Then I read it. Someone heard a slap. Who got slapped? Who did the slapping? I heard Mike Calaveras was slapped. There were two slaps? Where's the deputy? Then the news article. Here it is, a lady, ex-law enforcement, slapped a man. According to the news, she was ex-law enforcement, and it's a good thing, I think, that she didn't have a gun. Calaveras politics is still the same that I have heard about for, since going back to the 70s. I do love this county, but you know what? There's a reputation, and it hasn't changed. The criminals in this county get away with it, obviously, because the board seems to want to let them. So the criminals win. They didn't have to pay any taxes. They didn't have to pay any registration fee. They didn't have to come out and say, this is who I am. I did. I came out and said, this is who I am. This is why I'm this way. And you know what? You want to talk about attorneys? Attorneys and doctors, medical doctors, have been fighting this fight at the federal level for ages. Okay? There's people here that say, federal law says it's illegal. Well, you know what? Heroin is simply heroin. And the opioids are the same thing, except they're made in a lab. So, you want to follow federal law? Why don't we start with state law? Because you know what? There were people here on this board that wanted to wait for the state to do their thing. Let's follow state law. Go with that. People should not be willing to display violence. They should act like adults. And they have been living with a federal lie all their lives. It's time for this lie to stop. And it's going to stop with this generation. State law, federal law, which one do you want to follow?
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Yep, we'll close public comments now, and we'll open them up at the end of the meeting. We'll take a 5-minute break. All right, we're back in session. County Council, can you expand on the point of order that was brought before us?
Yes, I'm looking at the Fair Political Practice Commission Regulation 18704, the title of that section being Making, Participating in Making, or Using or Attempting to Use Official Position to Influence a Government Decision. There's a number of exceptions where a government official can make a decision about his or her own position. One of the exceptions is making, participating in, or influencing a government decision does not include terms of employment and action by a public official relating to his or her compensation or the terms or conditions of his or her employment or consulting contract. And I do believe that that exception, 18704D3, applies in this situation. I know that this is something that has been researched in the past. I wasn't part of that research, but this is something that I believe our office has been comfortable with for a long time. I'm not seeing anything immediately in that decision that would change my mind at this point.
So we're good.
I think so.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 2 on our agenda. Madam Clerk.
Item 2 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution rescinding the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial cannabis registration 2016-893 for Robert Smoot at a site located at 1211 Pony Way, Angels Camp, APN number 053-007-025.
What is your point of order? Do you have a number for your point of order? What do you have a number that we're...
Oh, beginning with this one. I brought it up earlier. I don't see how this board, having just approved...
Marty,
Wait, just approved... Please.
What is your point of order?
I'm telling you, I don't know how you can proceed and expect to give a fair appeal hearing when you have just approved a ban.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're
And
going to
I
move
would
forward.
like that addressed by county council.
We're going to move forward. Thank you.
Oh, well,
Okay, I will open the hearing for this, and the procedures for the hearing will be as follows. Staff presentation and board questions to staff. Presentation by the applicant. Presentation by members of the public shall be limited to 5 minutes per person. Summation and rebuttal of appellant, 15 minutes for each appellant. Staff summation and rebuttal. Sir rebuttal by members of the public. Then board questions. I will close the hearing, and we have a board discussion and deliberation. So, Peter, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Peter Maurer with the Planning Department. This is, as stated by the clerk, an appeal of a denial by the Planning Commission of a medical cannabis cultivation registration, number 2016-893. This was denied by planning staff after we received communication from the Water Board that they had been notified twice of an incomplete application before for the Water Board. One of the requirements, section 1795-165 and 4, requires a notice of applicability, which is the permit from the Water Board, or a complete application for notice of intent, and that's the application for it. So arcane language, but the notice of intent is the application for the Water Board. The notice of applicability is the permit that they issue. So either one of those was a requirement of our urgency ordinance that had to be submitted by September 7th, 2016. Because of the flood of applications that the Water Board received, they were as behind as we were in processing all the applications. And the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board covers everything from south of Calaveras County all the way up to the Oregon border and everything that drains into the Central Valley. So everything other than the coastal counties. So over time, they were catching up, and as they realized that some individuals had submitted an application, needed additional information, they sent out a notice. A notice was sent to the registrant with a copy to the county in January of last year, indicating that there was an incomplete application. No response was made at that point in time, at least none that we were aware of. A second notice went out in June of last year, and again, we did not receive any communication from the registrant or from the Water Board that there was any action. Finally, in August or September last year, we received a list of all of the registrants that had incomplete applications. And so we looked at those, reviewed them against our files, and issued a denial letter for failure to submit a complete application. What we later determined was that Mr. Smoot, the registrant's name, was inaccurately included in that list. That he had his consultant, Mr. Sam Davey, had submitted information to the board, and for whatever reason, they did not. That wasn't tracked properly, and the name was inadvertently included in the list. This we discovered just last month, December 28th. We confirmed with Mr. Parker from the Water Board that his name should not have been on the list. So that was really the sole reason that this application was denied. However, when the Planning Commission held its hearing in November, there was a lot of discussion about the timing, the response, the need to have filed a complete application. And what was missing was the a component of the application process. I'm drawing a blank right now on the name of the document that needed to be submitted. But it was something that was required as part of the submittal. The Planning Commission found that should have been part of the application packet in September of 2016, and it was almost a year later that that was finally submitted. The Planning Commission found that it wasn't a timely filing, and that there had not been a response to the notices, and therefore they had denied the appeal. Given the situation and how we have handled the applications for water board, with their backlog of applications, as long as the registrants were making a timely process and working with the water board to complete the registration or the notice process to get the notice of applicability, we would not deny an application for that reason. So in this case, there was delay, but other applications have been in similar situations, and we have allowed those to continue the process. Remember, the water board's purpose is to protect the water quality of the region. And so whether they have an approved registration or not from the county, they want to see the improvements put in place to ensure that there's not runoff and erosion that would harm the downstream water quality. And so their purpose, they're not really concerned whether or not they have an approved registration or not. If they're growing, if they were cultivating, they want to make sure that the water board standards are in place, and that's what they review for. So they require cultural resource studies, biological resource studies, a management plan, which was a component that was not, a site management plan, which was a component that was not submitted, to ensure that ongoing operations would protect the water quality of the basin. That has since been submitted. It was submitted sometime in between the June notice and the September list that came out. We don't have an exact date of when that was submitted. Perhaps Mr. Smoot's attorney has that information. But at this point, had the name not appeared on the list, we would not have denied the application. That was the only reason for denial of this application at this point in time. But because the Planning Commission has already acted upon it, we as staff cannot overturn that Planning Commission recommendation. An appeal has been filed. So the options before you are to either grant or deny the appeal based on the information that you have before you, or refer it back to the Planning Commission if you feel that this is new information and should be reconsidered by the Planning Commission. Staff at this point would recommend that the denial be rescinded, that the appeal be granted based on the information that we have from the water board at this point in time. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Miller, thank you very much. I just want to make very clear. So your department is recommending that we rescind the denial.
Yes.
And the only reason we denied this was based upon this list that is no longer valid.
Well, the fact that Mr. Smoot's name was on the list, and it should not have been. The list was valid, it just was an error on the list.
Okay, thank you. Seems pretty straightforward.
I should also point out, we did receive a letter. I passed out copies to everyone. It just had come into our department, was not directly to the board, but it was on behalf of this appeal from a neighbor who expressed some concerns about cultivation and this property in particular, and request that the appeal be denied. So that letter is in front of you. I gave a copy to the applicant or the appellant, and copies are on the podium for the public if they're interested.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes. Peter, so the only issue before the board today has to do with the water board application and whether or not you were properly noticed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there is no other issues that could be discussed on this matter?
That was the sole reason for denial of the registration. There were no other issues associated with this.
Have there been inspections on the property as a part of the application process by our staff?
I'm looking for our checklist to see where what the status was of that.
unfortunately, the checklist that we normally, oh, here it is. There isn't a record of having been inspected yet. There are still a large number of sites that have not yet been inspected. So usually what happens when we identify a reason for denial, we will not send code compliance out to make the inspection because they've got enough work on their hands to inspect those that still need it. This was a reason for denial that was unrelated to the need for inspection. So should you choose to grant the appeal, or if you refer back to the commission and the commission grants the appeal, all it does is rescind the denial for that reason. We would still complete our review and analysis, do an inspection, make sure that they were in compliance with the provisions of the urgency ordinance before granting issue registration.
So at this stage, we're not, you're not moving to approving an application. You're still continuing a process of an approval of an application, which will still require an on-site inspection, and that by itself may conclude to some other things that may come down the road, correct?
Yeah, that's true. If the there were two other things that are not checked on this, so there's a few other steps we need to do to make sure that they're fully in compliance before we issue it. It doesn't necessarily mean that if there's some other reason that it was denied, if they went out and did the inspection and found that, you know, fences were missing or it was in poor condition, that it may be denied for that reason.
Okay, so again, we're only dealing with the timely filing of the information to your office regarding the water board, and that's the only issue before us today.
That's correct.
Okay.
Supervisor Oliveira.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, we'll have a couple quick moments here. Thank you. Couldn't hear you. You mentioned that other applications have been in a similar situation and they've been approved. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I may have misheard.
Approved or not denied for that reason. As long as the registrant is working with the water board to meet their requirements, and then we have allowed that to continue.
Okay.
We wouldn't approve it until we actually got the final approval from the water board.
You mentioned also that there was some indication of non-response by the appellant from the January notice, the July notice, and then the notice of the water board. Could you relate can you impound on that a little bit?
So, yeah, we had nothing in our files and no records from the water board that there was any response to their January 2017 notice of incomplete.
Okay.
And it wasn't until they received the second notice in June that action started.
So one would surmise that the appellant may have been in the frame of mind that everything was okay with the water board? Is that what you're saying?
I can't put...
I understand you can't put yourself in the appellant's mind.
So I don't know why they did not respond at that first time.
All right. But it would be normal that the water board advise the appellant.
Yes.
If there was a problem.
Yes.
And we have no record of such advisement.
Well, no, there was two notices. One that went out in January, one that went out in June. So they said, your application is incomplete. You needed to submit the site management plan. And no response occurred at that point in time. In June, they sent out a second notice of incomplete application. And at that point in time, and I don't know if the exact timing, but it wasn't until then that communication started between the water board and the registrant. We did not receive any copies of that communication, so they were communicating directly with the water board and not through us or not copying us on any of that information. So as far as we knew at the time that we received the notice from the water board, there had been no communication at all, and that was the reason why we denied it.
Having said all this, is there any indication from the water board that the appellant has not met their standards? Do we have any indication from the water board, from any other source?
It's my understanding at this point in time that they have now met all the requirements. I don't know if they've actually issued the notice of applicability, but they do have the complete application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Supervisor Garamendi.
Mr. Chair, we have a situation, I've been on this board, we haven't faced this to my memory, where we've got a recommendation for denial based upon a single item. We haven't gone through all the hoops yet. We've got staff recommending that we rescind this prior decision. So my question would be, do we need to do this hearing? I mean, do we need to go through all this? I mean, we're not defending our position against the appellant. So somebody tell me.
So in this case, the Planning Commission has acted, and so their action is final unless either they decide to reconsider it or you overturn that decision.
Okay.
And so I think at this point we're sort of stipulating that there was an error involved in our initial decision, and that it would be appropriate to basically rescind that action through granting the appeal. The alternative is, there was a lot of additional discussion made. The Planning Commission could still say, hey, that was plenty of time. Why did you wait until June? You could refer it back to the Planning Commission if that would change their mind, or you could decide it doesn't really matter to us what this new information is. We still think the Planning Commission's action was appropriate. So there's a range of alternatives before you. I'm just telling you that had we not had that misinformation, we would not have denied this application at this point. That doesn't necessarily mean it wouldn't be denied based on some other reason. It may also pass site inspection with flying colors and be appropriate for approval of the registration.
So, Mr. Maurer, I have a couple questions. So if we send this back to the Planning Commission, at that time it comes to the Planning Commission, other and new evidence can be presented at that commission?
Yes.
So it wouldn't just be limited to the NOI?
If there was additional new information that we were aware of, that could be presented at the Planning Commission. At this point, there is no additional new information that I'm aware of, other than what we received from the Water Board.
But it wouldn't just be limited to that?
But ultimately, final approval or denial of this registration would be based on the full range of requirements, not just the Water Board.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Appeal it.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Board, staff, council. I'm here on behalf of the appellant, Robert Smoot. My name is Jason Molinelli. In the interest of time, based on the planning director's recommendation, we would respectfully request that this board adopt that recommendation. And we understand that it is not an approval of Mr. Smoot's application, but rather to return it to the review process. Doing so would be consistent with the prior procedures of the planning department, as you've heard. In the alternative, I heard Director Maurer state that it could be sent back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. If that were in the interest of the board, I would recommend an alternative, continue this hearing and remand it back to the Planning Commission in the interim so that they would be in a position to reconsider the appeal. Again, in an interest of time, I won't go into the rest of the brief. Rather, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you. And we'll open it up to members of the public. It's limited to 5 minutes per person, and it has to do on this appeal, and this appeal only. Any comments?
Sorry, I'll also add there are copies of the brief here along with a letter for members of the public.
Good morning, Board. I'm a neighbor of Rob Smoot's. Him and I have had disagreements with this issue, but he is a man of hardworking, and I think it should go back to the Planning Commission so that
me and my neighbors can submit more evidence. Thank you.
Morning, Board. District 1. Again, Mr. Smoot seems to have been convicted before he was charged, denied before the wheels of government were able to proceed through the mire that people wanting to be regulated, wanting to do the right thing, ever got around to. Evidently, his appeal, his name ended up on a list that said he was not a person that had performed according to the county's strict regulatory procedure because he didn't get his paperwork in by September 7th. The county has now realized that that was a mistake, not made by them, but made by the state. Another application put in a pile, not processed because it wasn't complete. You have a chance to rectify that or to send it back to the planning department, who may end up denying it again and sending it back to you for being denied again. But a piece of paper, again, a piece of paper, a government entity who had the responsibility to a person who made an investment, who bared his rear end to the public to be inspected. He hasn't been inspected. Nobody came out and looked at his farm and saw that he was doing things right. You have somebody here that wants it to go back so they can make more complaints about him. More lies be told, more things be said. I think it would be strange for this board to actually approve this, but I think that's the right thing to do.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. And County Council, you have something?
I just wanted the board to, I want to just read the procedure that's been discussed here about sending a hearing back to the Planning Commission under County Code. The procedure is 1798070B, and it reads, no issue which was not addressed during the hearing upon which the appeal is based shall be part of the appeal hearing. All relevant and known facts must be presented to Planning Department staff and the Planning Commission. In the event that new information is presented on appeal, and the board has been interpreting that as factual information as opposed to new legal issues, the Board of Supervisors shall have discretion to remand the project to the Planning Commission for consideration of new facts or issues. So it's not clear from that statement that the entire hearing reopens to new issues. That being said, as Mr. Maurer had stated, if they haven't finished actually vetting the application, there could be additional bases brought forward for denial later. But I don't read 070B as allowing a whole new hearing on issues that have already been considered and decided. And then I heard Mr. Molinelli use the term reconsideration, and that has a special meaning under the new Planning Commission rules and procedures. That's a different procedure to actually reconsider a past decision. So I just want the board to be aware that here what we're talking about is, and it's usually applied to appellants. Here, if an appellant had facts that they couldn't have brought forward at the Planning Commission meeting, and the board thought that these newly discovered facts might actually make a difference or change its mind, the Planning Commission should hear them first so that the lower tribunal has a chance to weigh in on them before the board hears them. I'm not sure that that necessarily has to apply to a situation where the planning department itself is bringing forward a new fact. I think the board has some leeway on whether it wants to interpret that provision to require it to go back to the planning commission. I don't know that the board has to require it to go back because it seems to have been set up for appellants to not bring up new information, but that would be up to the board. But just wanted you to see where this is coming from.
Any questions on that? All right. Do we have a summation and rebuttal from the appellant?
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Counsel. I understand the difference between whether we obtained the new evidence, which I think in this instance is the letter or the notice from the State Water Board that came in December 28th saying it was erroneous that Mr. Smoot was included on that list. But, and again, in this instance, that evidence was presented to the board here today by the planning department. So I would ask then that rather, if the board sees fit, then creating additional administrative proceedings that the board act here in its best interest and adopt the planning director's recommendation to grant the appeal and return Mr. Smoot's application back to the review process. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff summation?
If I may, I'd like to make just one clarifying point. Ethan Turner, Deputy County Counsel. This issue is whether or not a complete application and a correctly classified application was applied, was submitted to the Water Board prior to September 7th. We erroneously believe that it wasn't. It was. And I want to clarify that because it's distinguishable from other denials that have occurred, and we're going to later hear. This individual applied for the correct tier, paid the appropriate fee, and submitted a complete application prior to September 7th. The list being referenced was a list of people who failed to meet that requirement. He was not on, he should not have been on it. He was. So his denial on this particular point was because we erroneously believed that he failed to meet that September 7th requirement. There are other denials where a person submitted a complete application for the wrong classification and then later failed to correct that in a timely manner and failed to pay the appropriate fee, et cetera. This is not one of those cases. This individual completed the process as he should have with the state.
Peter, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to address a point that was raised in public comment about this is denied for failing to provide a piece of paper. Well, technically that may be true. The piece of paper represents compliance with a broad range of requirements established by the state to protect water quality. And that's where the real issue is whether or not water quality is protected. So I sort of took umbrage a little bit about, we denied this for not having a piece of paper. It was denied because we believed at the time that they were not complying with the requirements of the state for water quality protection. And so the paper represents conformance, and I just want to put that on the record.
Questions? All right. So we'll open it up again for rebuttal by the members of the public. Any member of the public?
I don't know if Peter can answer this, but Peter, can you answer how soon the inspections will be happening on this property?
That would be up to the code compliance officers and how their schedule works. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Any other?
Morning, gentlemen. Eric Cope. I've lived on Bar 20 and District 4 for 28 years. I just wanted to point out two things. In the attorney's filing on this appeal, he indicated that the neighbors generally do not object to the commercial marijuana grow. I want to be on record that this neighbor strenuously objects, and we don't want to see it continue. The second thing I'd like to point out is if this does go back to the planning department, I would really like their inspectors to inspect the property or look at satellite GIS imagery to compare the property today to how it was on 10 May 2016. So, thank you.
Any of the public? If not, I'll close public comments. And we will go to board questions. Are there any board questions? Supervisor Oliveira, you're contemplating a question?
No, I'm contemplating our next move as far as board deliberation. I have no questions at this time, but I do have a statement.
Supervisor Mills, your light's on.
Yes, if we're going to have to deal with these issues as a matter of consistency. And it's been reiterated to us over and over again that where information is available to us, it was not available to the Planning Commission at the time they made their decision. That puts it in a little different situation. If this is the only issue we can rule on, it's possible that we could come back again in the future on another subsequent denial in the application process and deal with that. I would rather deal with it with a parcel as a bulk of the entire issue at hand rather than a piece at a time. This could wrap us up into a lot of denials and appeals of denials, et cetera. So I think the best move for us is to see this as information that the Planning Commission did not have at their disposal at the time they made their decision, and make that the consideration in what we do.
Mr. Chair? Respectfully, I understand Supervisor Mills' position, and I have taken that position in past appeals.
Can we hold on just a second, Supervisor Oliveira? We're at board questions at this time. I'll need to close the hearing, and then we can go into discussion at that time. So are there any questions? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Now we can go into discussion.
Hopefully everybody remember I just said, 'cause I can't. Bottom line here, folks, is we have a procedure. That was not the fault of the appellant, not the fault of our planning commission, not the fault of our planning department. It was based on erroneous information. Decision was made. With all due respect to our planning commission, I would agree with Mr. Mauer's recommendation to actually rescind the decision made by the planning commission in this matter. I understand that there are other standards to be met, and the process of the application or the appellant getting his permit has some ways to go with further inspections, making sure that all the standards are met. So at this time, I'd be prepared to make a motion to accept Mr. Mauer's recommendation and just rescinding this decision and continue the application process, saving resources and time from our planning commission, which does a very, very long and important job.
I concur. I mean, we don't need to send it back to them to answer a question that we know the answer to right now. If it falls apart in the rest of the application process, I'm sure we'll see it again. But I'll second Mr. Oliveira's motion.
Okay,
I would prefer this be remanded back just for the sake of consistency.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Supervisor Oliveira and Supervisor Garamendi. We should just move forward here and let it go. There's more inspections that need to be done. It could be denied for other reasons. It could go back to the Planning Commission for that. So I have a motion.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chair.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 4-1. Moving forward. Item number 3. Madam Clerk.
Item 3 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial medical cannabis registration 2016-462 for John Mendoza on APN 004-061.
Peter, are you ready to go into it, or you need any time to get set up?
No, in fact, we have received a written withdrawal of this appeal, and so there's no action necessary. They've withdrawn their appeal, the planning commission action stands. So we can move on to item 4.
Withdraw. Okay. Madam Clerk, item number 4.
Item 4 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial medical cannabis registration 2016-606 for Elizabeth Denhart on APN 052-012-023.
I will open the hearing for this item. Is the appellant here?
Yes, the appellant's here.
Right.
Today I'm here to present Appeal 2016-552 and also 606, which is the appeal that's coming up. It's essentially the same thing. It's for the same registrants, the same reason for denial. Before I start my presentation, the appellant would like to have a few words with the board, if possible, and she submitted this letter to the planning department earlier today. If you take the time to consider it.
I'd like to interrupt. We are on Appeal 606 right now.
606.
Yeah, we were just handed a letter on this item.
Is this for 606?
That's for 606 and 552 as well.
So it's for items number
4 and 5.
Can the appellant come forward? You're Ms. Denhart?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is your letter you just sent?
Yeah.
All right. You have 2 items on here, item number 4 and item number 5, and you are asking for withdrawal for both of them?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't really see any purpose in pursuing it, seeing as how the board has chosen to ban in the county. And I'm selling both my properties. I'm not re-enrolling my children in school here next year. I'm leaving, so I don't really wish to pursue it any further.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're withdrawing both your appeals for item number 4 and number 5?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to ask for my appeal fee to be refunded if possible. They said it would be a matter up to the board.
County Counsel?
I think usually when we waive fees, that has to be agendized separately with separate findings made. I think that would have to come back separately. I mean, the work to prepare the appeal has already been done, so I think the board would need to make a special finding. The board would still have discretion to do it, but I think that would have to come back as a separately agendized request.
She would have to submit a request to planning in order for him to bring it back to us.
I think so.
So if you want to submit a request to planning for a refund, then you can bring it back to us.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. And the other request that I was asking in my letter is if I could just withdraw my, I don't know what it would be called, like the permits, instead of them being denied for something that was pretty ridiculous in the first place, and just close them myself instead of having the denial put for, because if a county denies it, then it affects it statewide. And so
I don't think anybody here can guarantee you were denied by the planning department and then appeal in the planning commission and then are appealing that denial, and I don't think any of us here can say whether that would the state might still consider that a denial. We don't know. But we would have to, we couldn't change any of what's already happened.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it would affect it or not.
I personally feel if I submitted the facts to the state that they would view it differently than it's being viewed here. I did a background check just by a third party, and I have no criminal background. I have nothing to be really denied for something like this. Both of my properties passed inspections, and I just didn't do my background check in Calaveras County. But I personally believe that the state would look at all those facts and think it was
That's up
okay.
to you filing with the state.
Right.
But right now, we can't reverse the planning commission.
Yeah, I understand
The
that.
board could choose, just like the prior appellant, filed a withdrawal. I think the appellant can unilaterally choose to say, I don't want to fight this anymore, and we don't have to have the hearing. I just think we need to be clear that we're not making any promises that this is going to somehow have an effect on her application. But I think, she can be allowed to withdraw so that we don't have to do the hearing, because it's up to her.
Absolutely. Yes, you can. So if you wish to withdraw, we would withdraw both items number 4 and 5.
Okay, and then I could submit a request to the planning department. Okay.
Okay?
Okay, that sounds fine to me.
All right.
Okay.
Close the hearing.
So just
sorry to interrupt, can the board submit a request for that withdrawal be made for the previous to just the planning department, like for their, since that's already come and passed, it's kind of like a mute point.
I think you can ask the planning department for whatever you want, and the planning department will work with staff and agendize as necessary with the board, whatever can be agendized.
Okay.
I don't know that they can do that, but it's not something the board could decide right now.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. What is your point of order?
I'm Elizabeth's neighbor, and I was here today to represent myself and 7 other neighbors around
Okay.
her.
She's withdrawn, so
So what about happened, all the co-compliance problems and all the
that-
dogs?
that's deal with code compliance, if there's been issues with code
Just wanna
compliance.
make sure we're in
Okay,
the
but
right
that has nothing to do with point of order here. So you'll have to submit, and I'm not sure county council or Peter would accept your letter. You're asking for a return of the money for the permit, so it would suffice for her,
Not for my permit fee, just for the appeal.
just for the appeal. So you have to send in you have to go in and give them an application for a refund on your,
Okay.
and that's up to Peter and whether he wants to do it or bring it to us for our approval.
The letter that she requested asking is sufficient to initiate the request, but we would need to process that and bring it back to you if in order to approve such a refund.
Okay. All right.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
So just for the record, can I read into the record item 5?
Yes.
So item 5 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial medical cannabis registration.
Can we, hey, quiet please, if you want to talk, leave the chambers, okay?
Commercial medical cannabis registration 2016-552 for Elizabeth Denhart on APN 053-006-019. The application was withdrawn.
And can you please read the letter that she presented to us into the record?
We received a letter, it was provided during item number 4, for items 4 and 5 on today's agenda. The letter is from Elizabeth Denhart. It's dated 1/16/2018. It says, I would like to request a withdrawal of my commercial permits instead of a denial of the permits, and if possible, a withdrawal of my appeal and a refund of the $1,000, $500 per permit appeal fee. Thank you, Elizabeth Denhart.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, item number 6.
Item number 6 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial medical cannabis registration 2016-943 for Leslie Denham Newman on APN 040-009-041.
Is the appellant present? Okay. I will open the hearing.
I think that my staff who was going to present this was not expecting the 3 items before it to go so quickly, and she's not here. Maybe this would be a good time.
We will take a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay, just to reiterate, we're on item 6, which is an appeal for cannabis, commercial medical cannabis registration 2016943 for Leslie Denham Newman on APN 040-009-041.
And again, the hearing is open and the appealant is present. Yes. So, staff, your presentation.
Good morning. Madeline Flandreau, Planner 2. Today I am presenting the appeal for 2016-943 for Leslie Denham Newman. On July 11th, 2016, Mr. Leslie Denham Newman submitted an application to the Planning Department for 22,000 square feet of mixed light commercial medical cannabis cultivation on a parcel that's located at 2200 Gold Strike Road in San Andreas. This is APN 040-009-041. The reason for denial, the appellant was denied for receiving 2 notices of incomplete notice of intent from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is a violation of Section 1795.165.N.4. On August 10th, 2016, the appellant applied for Tier 2 with the Regional Water Board on their notice of intent and submitted a copy of this application to the Planning Department. Subsequently, on September 13th, 2016, a notice of incomplete notice of intent was sent to the appellant, stating that the Water Board staff had determined that the notice of intent was incomplete as he had selected an incorrect tier size based on the size of area that he had disturbed and the distance to a surface water body. He's located adjacent to the Calaveras River. On June 27th, 2017, the Regional Water Board sent the appellant a second notice of incomplete notice of intent, stating that the applicant had 30 days to respond and to resubmit a new NOI form and the required biological site assessment, cultural resources inventory, and a site management plan. And according to Regional Water Board staff, Mr. Denham did not respond within the 30 days. So he was denied on September 7th, 2017 for failure to come into compliance with the Water Board's requirements because, according to the Planning Department's records, he did not resubmit a corrected notice of intent. An appeal of the denial was submitted to the Planning Department on September 21st, 2017, and in his appeal letter, Mr. Denham explained that he was in communication with the Water Board in September 2016 after he had received his first notice of incomplete NOI. In the appeal letter, he also stated that he contested the Water Board's determination that his selection of Tier 2 was correct, stating that his cultivation site was not greater than 1 acre, which is one of the stipulations for a Tier 3, and was more than 200 feet away from the North Fork of the Calaveras River. Mr. Denham also stated that he was advised by staff at the Water Board to reapply for Tier 3, but to withhold his payment, and that they would discuss his application at a later date once they had reviewed his paperwork. However, the Water Board has no record of a second NOI application being received from Mr. Denham. During the Planning Commission hearing that was on October 26, 2017, the appellant made a presentation and submitted a copy of the new notice of intent that was signed on October 20th, 2016, that he stated he immediately submitted to the Regional Water Board after his initial conversation with their staff back in September of 2016, after he received his first notice of incomplete NOI. The appellant also submitted a copy of a proposal with an environmental consultant signed October 19th, 2017, authorizing completion of all the required surveys, the biological assessment, the cultural resources, and the site management plan. The appellant also stated that during the initial conversation with Water Board staff that he had been advised to hold off on having the surveys completed as the parcel had been previously used for cattle grazing lands and was therefore exempt. The appellant reasserted during his presentation to the Planning Commission that he had made multiple attempts to contact the Regional Water Board staff after he received his second notice of incomplete NOI in June of 2017, but wasn't able to get in touch with, Mr. Michael Parker with the Water Board staff, and that he did not receive a response until after he was denied by the Planning Department. According to the appellant, Water Board staff informed him that they did not have a copy of the resubmitted NOI applying for Tier 3, in his file, and that biological and cultural surveys were indeed required. Therefore, the Planning Commission found the appellant to be in violation of 1795-165 and 4 of the urgency ordinance and voted 3-2 to deny the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of application for commercial cannabis cultivation registration 2016-943. And that's my presentation.
More questions?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just want to be clear. So he says he submitted the paperwork to WCB correctly after when they asked for it.
Yes.
To get the correct tier. He's disputing whether it needs to be on tier 2 or tier 3. WCB has not heard the appeal or can't find the paperwork, and we just heard a appeal where WCB is putting wrong names down. So we're basing our decision solely upon the word of WCB and their paperwork, correct? And it's he said, she said. So he's got a document that he says he submitted. They can't find it, but they, just from today, it's hard to have a lot of confidence in them. So is there any other reason for the appeal, or are we basing this solely on the paperwork of the WCB?
Solely on the Water Board's determination, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Mill.
I'm a little confused here. You've got a statement of July 11, 2016, submitted an application. What does 1795.165A say as to when the application was supposed to be submitted?
So the applications were required to be submitted by June 30th. We had a lineup outside the door of several hundred people that we could not accept all of their applications. What we did, we took everyone's name and phone number and said, we will contact you to come in afterwards, because they were in line on the 30th. We just did not have the ability to process them all. We would have been here well past midnight, probably for several days. In fact, it took us almost 2 weeks to take in the last of the applications. But we did not allow anyone that had not been in line before 5 o'clock on on June 30th, which was the deadline.
So in essence, because I know Supervisor Garamendi and I were both here on that day, on June 30th, they did submit an application on June 30th. We didn't get around to doing anything with it until July 11th. Would that be a more correct statement?
Yes. They were here prepared to submit. We documented that they were here, and then we contacted them for the actual formal sit-down submittal process, where we'd actually go through the paperwork, make sure that they had the documents that we required for submittal. And that happened on July 11th.
Well, I understand words are important, so, to say that they submitted the application on July 11th, actually they didn't. They submitted it on time, but we are acting upon it on July 11th is the more correct statement.
That could be a way to put it, yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff, I understand the packet that we have the NOIs, the Notice of Intent from the Water Board. I find only one. Is there any more than one Notice of Intent regarding this applicant from the Water Board? I have the one dated in October. I apologize. My iPad went south today.
You're referring to the attachment, not the one that was included in the staff report that went to the Planning Commission. You're talking about the one that's from October 19th.
October 19th, that's correct.
Yes, that is the new notice of intent that the appellant states that he submitted to the Water Board, the second NOI.
And is that the only NOI that we have submitted by the appellant?
No, there is the original notice of intent that I believe is from July of 2016.
July of 2016.
That's in the staff report package.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. We now have a presentation by the appellant.
Good morning, Chairman Toffanelli, members of the board. My name's Chris Williams. I'm an attorney. I represent Leslie Denham. I have the pleasure of knowing all of you personally, and therefore I expect special treatment. I'd like to just, I did provide some information. Did everyone get my appeal, the appeal that I drafted on behalf? Okay. I have some additional, it's an additional chain of emails that I would like to submit just to supplement the record. Basically, it's more from people at the Water Board that explain what was going on, the chaos that was occurring there at the height of this application process.
This is new evidence that was not presented at the Planning Commission, Chris?
It's more supporting. It's the same. It's just filling out with more emails. I don't know that it's new evidence.
You can give it to the clerk. I'll have county council look at it and make a decision as to whether we can use it or not.
What? I don't know what the password is. I begin by saying that this applicant has not failed to do anything that he was supposed to do, and he has not done anything that he wasn't supposed to do. What I tried to lay out in there, in the paper that you have, is the chronology. He believed from the beginning that he qualified for Tier 2. He took out a tape measure and measured the distance to the Calaveras River. I think that the Water Board did it by aerial. I'd take the tape measure myself as a more accurate. So he was talking, well, let's go back. He filed the Tier 2 application on time. It was bounced back with a notice from the Water Board saying they felt it was Tier 3. He immediately began discussions with them, immediately with the Water Board, and talking about the issues that would make it a Tier 3 versus a Tier 2. Now, one of the things I think this appeal encompasses is what's a member of the public supposed to do? Who are they supposed to believe? Which agency, spokesperson, or representative do they rely on? He was talking to people at the Water Board. They were talking about the distance to the stream, whether more than 1 acre of land was disturbed, and I think also whether he might have an outright exemption because this land was previously cattle grazing land. So after he got the first notice, he immediately filed a new NOI, a Tier 3 application, and he did so also with the understanding from people he spoke to at the Water Board that he could do so without filing the fee, without filing at the same time the environmental studies required by Tier 3, until they sorted out these issues that they had been talking about. That's a very reasonable course of action for him to take. He was taking the advice of the Water Board, and as was pointed out to the Planning Commission below, you have a copy of the second application that he filed for Tier 3. It's got October signatures on it from his landowners. Why would he go to the trouble of getting those signatures and then not file the application? I'm willing to bet you that his application, second one, was lost in the shuffle, lost in the chaos. You will see in the communications from Michael Parker and Trey, I think his name was Sherrill. You've heard it from members of the planning department themselves. There was akin to chaos there in the Water Board. They cover the whole northern coast. So it doesn't surprise me that they can't find a record of that application. I think the circumstantial evidence is high that he had filled out and he filed it. And in fact, you have a copy that has the signatures on it. The gripe seems to be that, well, after he got the second notice, he didn't do anything. I mean, he just waited around. Well, he didn't wait around. He immediately started calling the board. The water board was engaged in discussions with a gentleman named Michael Parker. He had extreme difficulty but get no calls back. And if you look at the chain of emails that was submitted with my original brief, even the planner, Madeline Flandreau, says that this guy is really hard to get in touch with. So what does he do then? He calls Madeline. And they both start trying to get the guy at the water board. Finally get him. And in essence, if you look at what he wrote on September 19th, it says, we're going to waive the 30-day notice for you to have responded, and you can go ahead and do what you have to do to apply for our approval. It's clear. I don't know how it can be misinterpreted. It's clear. So he's being charged with not being vigilant, not taking action, not doing what he was supposed to do. He did everything he could do. And to say, I know one of the planning commissioners below said, well, I don't care what the water board does or says. Well, that's not right. They have their jurisdiction. You should not be preempting the water board's jurisdiction. And they've given this guy a green light to get his information in. There are no violations. He's had inspections. He is responded to inspections. And so this is kind of an iteration of the smooth appeal that you heard earlier. And I think it should receive the same treatment. I think that the Planning Commission should be reversed and that the application should be processed. I can't help but I tend to stray off into the more global issues in this thing. This was a huge undertaking that the board started, and it begot a lot of confusion and chaos here before the water board. Mistakes were made, but common sense should allow some of these. I don't even think there's an infraction here. He acted with vigilance and diligence. He did everything he could do. He relied on the water board's representations, and he gets thrown out anyway. So I would ask you to consider that. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have, but he deserves to be reinstated.
Is that it, Chris?
Unless you have questions.
I want the county council to rule on what you submitted to us.
I don't think I can rule, but I can certainly guide the board. The evidence that is being proffered is a series of emails that are being submitted in order to help support the appellant's position. And according to Mr. Williams, they have not been presented to the Planning Commission. I think what the board has done in previous situations like this is maybe take a look at the evidence, see if it's something that's significant enough that it is likely to weigh in on how their decision is going to be made. And if it's something that you think is going to impact your decision or be given a lot of weight for your decision, then you would want to kick it back to the Planning Commission. If you think it's immaterial to your decision, then you can just enter it into the record and continue on.
Okay.
So should we take a moment to pass it
Why
around?
don't we take a few moments and let the board members.
Could I just say one thing about I think it falls into kind of another category. It's sort of cumulative of the evidence that was submitted before about the chaos, the confusion, what could have happened to his application at the state board, why they don't have a record of it.
Okay. We're going to take a few minutes here and let the board read what you presented. Okay? All right. Is there any questions by the board for the appellant's representation?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for counsel. Mr. Williams, is your client present today?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Did your office, and when you were retained as legal counsel, did you have any attempts to contact Michael, the representative of the Water Board? Did you have any conversations with him?
I had no conversations with him.
Did you have any investigators have any conversations with him?
No, I did not.
Did you attempt to corroborate the information provided by your client to you regarding this matter?
No, because I had emails from the person who he was representing said certain things. We have the emails from Michael Parker and Trey Sherrill.
I noticed that in reviewing the emails, and we're still considering this as possible, Mr. Chair. I noticed in reviewing the emails submitted by you just prior to our break that Trey Sherrill, is that correct pronunciation?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah, he is now a employee or representative of California Cannabis Consultants. Is that correct? That's what the email address reads. And this is an email dated January 15th at 9:15 a.m. on Monday.
Which date is it, sir?
January 15th, 2018, 9:15 a.m. It's an email from Leslie Denham to Chris Williams.
Yeah,
And it references an email dated January 15th from Trey Sherrill, and the email address is the Cal Cannabis Consultants. I understand that he may have been with the Water Board and is now with the consultant group. Is that the situation? Do you know, sir?
I don't. Yes. No.
So Trey Sherrill and the planning department will back me up on this. He's the author of the Water Board's general order on for cannabis compliance for water. He left the Water Board last year, and has subsequently started his own consulting firm.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
So, I mean, if you think that shows some bias, you can discount its probity. But, I mean, he says he's pretty careful in what he says, and he's cautious. And I mean, it's not a silver bullet, but it's consistent with everything else that we hear about the water processes, the review processes at the Water Board. And I might say, sir, we had this gap in time between the second notice and what the planning staff thinks was inaction on my client's part. But what were they doing? I mean, my client was actively out there chasing this thing down and trying to get it straightened out. And another thing that was stated below by one of the planning commissioners was, well, why didn't he go ahead and submit the environmental report and the cultural resources report? It's because there were still issues in his mind and acknowledged that there were issues by the Water Board people that they wanted to straighten out. They wanted to finalize. And then, if it was true that he was definitely Tier 3, he would pay the additional fees and the $20,000 for consultants. I don't think it's odd at all that he didn't do that before he had to. These things are really expensive. I mean, these decisions are really expensive.
Mr. Williams, what I'm trying to do is corroborate the information provided. I'm looking for some type of cooperation or information that, yes, the Water Board did have difficulty in processing this application. I know we have emails. Nevertheless, in prior cases that this board has heard, we did have documentation provided through the Planning Commission. That's what I'm looking for. Is there anything to indicate that is the situation from either your presentation, and I'll be asking the same question of staff when it comes to their turn. Anything that's corroborating the information that, yes, this was a problem originating with the Water Quality Control Board?
Just the statements that are shown in the emails themselves that were submitted with the original appeal that I prepared and the subsequent one I gave you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Any other comments? All right. We will now have presentation by member of the public. 5 minutes per person. Any member of the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Chris, you're up again for summation.
Well, in summation, I think that the allegations against my client that he took no action in response to the second notice are clearly in error. He engaged in active communication. He received delayed responses from the Water Board. He involved Ms. Flandreau. She herself says this guy's tough to get in touch with at the Water Board. He did submit a second application. I mean, the circumstantial evidence is there. Why would he go around all of his landowners and get their signatures and then not submit it? But if you look at the chain of events and the dates, he was the only one who was trying to chase it down, who was trying to get it right, get the right paperwork in there. And thank God he was given a break by the water board, who said, I see the issues. Why don't you go ahead and get that Tier 3 in and hold off on paying the filing fee and getting your consulting reports until we get a look at it. And they've said that again. They said that on September 19th. That September 19th email clearly is allowing him more time to comply. So why won't the planning department allow him time to comply? He's been a good actor. I don't think there's anything that he's got any dings against him. So I would ask you to reverse the planning commission and reinstate his application. Thank you.
Staff summation and rebuttal.
I can't speak for what happened at the water board. When there had been no communication with our department from the registrant at all during the time frame until after it was denied. And we had to base our information on what we had. There were 2 notice of incomplete letters, and then a final follow-up that we made with the water board saying they did not have any information. Now, it may quite well be that they had information and they had misplaced it, but at the time that we took our action, there was nothing in our files. The registrant had not submitted any of these documents to us that he stated that he had submitted to the water board. So as far as we knew, it was an incomplete application. It continued to be incomplete until after the second notice went out. We denied it on September 7th. On September 19th, there was a flurry of activity between the registrant and the water board. And the planning commission felt on a 3-2 vote that they had not done enough to demonstrate that they were working with the water board. If you feel differently, that's within your purview. We do not. We based our action on the information we had at that time, and there had been no communication from the registrant to our department indicating that they were working with the water board. And it's not our responsibility to track these down. There were 740 registrants. It was up to each individual registrant to ensure that their application was filed timely and met all the requirements. We were doing the review of every one of these registrations in as timely a manner as we could given the resources that we had. We didn't call up people saying, how come we don't have this? If they didn't have it, it was their responsibility to bring it to us.
Supervisor Mills.
Peter, there seems to be some discrepancy from the appellant as to whether or not it was going to be a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 site, and that has been part of the conversation. I don't know if aerial imagery would be helpful, but it might do for us to better understand proximity, because we're talking about within 200 feet of the Calaveras River and all of these kind of things, to help better give us a visual on what this property looks like. Not that that's going to really change any of the decision point processes that have been required in the application. So I'm just thinking that
would that be considered new information? I mean, what we're ruling on right here is this WCB paperwork issue, not whether it's Tier 1 or Tier 2, correct?
I don't believe that that's really before you. The question, the decision whether it's Tier 2 or Tier 3 is made by the water board, not by the county.
Correct.
And so if they have made the determination it's Tier 3, we will rely on that. If in the future you would prefer to see some aerial imaging included in the packets so you have a better picture of what's happened on the ground, we can certainly do that.
That's the direction I was trying to go.
Okay.
Trey Sherrill had been in Calaveras County back in October of 2016. They made a presentation to the Calaveras County Water District Board, and I know you were around when it happened. So he had been involved in this at the very ground floor. And that decision that was made by the Water Board, the 115 decision, was basically a lot of his writing. So I can kind of understand his background and what he's doing. So I'm looking at the grading side of it. We did get a grading permit.
Is that germane to the question that we're trying to answer? Because we're talking about WCB. This was denied, as you stated earlier, solely based on WCB paperwork, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the grading permit's not part of our discussion?
A grading permit may not be part of our discussion, but the classification as to whether or not it's Tier 1 or Tier 3, or Tier 2 or Tier 3 was the reason for his application being incomplete. And this matter was discussed at the Planning Commission level, and it was concluded that there is no dispute any longer, even at the appellant's own admission, that it is a Tier 3 site.
So that's been resolved?
Yeah, and it was not as a consequence necessarily of the proximity to the Calaveras River, which it may or may not be 200 feet away from it, but there is adequate amount of disturbed earth within the entire cultivation site, which is over an acre. The confusion was that the appellant believed that the acre had to do with the area of his cultivation, not the entire site, which actually includes where the well is, parking areas, equipment, et cetera, the entire area of disturbed earth.
But we're only ruling on whether we think that the paperwork was submitted to WCB or not. Correct? That's the question.
That's the question.
Okay, so we've got his word and documentation saying that it was. We've got WCB former employees saying, maybe. Right?
And the current employee that said no, it was not received.
Right, but the current employee was not there at the time, or?
He was not there at the time that the first incomplete notice of intent letter went out. I don't know when Michael Parker started at the Water Board, but at the time of the second incomplete notice of intent letter, he was there.
So we're deciding whether we believe our citizen or the WCB, which is, with the prior hearing, maybe not the most reliable source.
Well, I would further point out that biological and cultural site assessments have not been done nor submitted, and that's not in dispute, nor has the Tier 3 fee been paid.
I understand that, and the appellant is saying that they were told they didn't have to while we went through this process.
Supervisor Alvar?
I believe Supervisor Mills was first.
Well, I just want to make a point of order. I hadn't given up the floor, and we got into a separate conversation here. And if there was a conversation that was out of track, then I would have requested of the chair that a point of order be raised so that we can have that discussion as a separate discussion. So I had not relieved the floor, so I will relinquish the floor at this time. Thank you.
Chair. Interesting that you mentioned the employee of the Water Board was not the employee at the start of this application process. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Correct, yes.
All right. And his information or her information to our Planning Commission or our Planning Department was that there was no indication of any application or any response from the NOI submitted by the Water Quality Control Board. Is that correct?
Submitted to the Water Board, yes.
Okay. And this was after the October date? The date listed on the second NOI that we have before us. Is that correct?
So the appellant and Mr. Parker began talking after the second notice of incomplete NOI. Which was when? When did we say that? June 27th. So the appellant began emailing Mr. Parker with the Water Board after that second notice of incomplete NOI in late June of 2017 and didn't get in touch with him for a couple of months, I believe. But
Okay, now, excuse me, I'm a little old. I have to follow this.
Yeah.
When you say he, do you mean the appellant or the Water Quality Control Board employee?
The appellant.
the appellant did not get in touch with a Water Quality Control Board employee, Michael, if you will?
Yes.
Until a couple of months after
Yeah, for
we
several
received
weeks,
that?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Supervisor
Now,
Miller.
I'm trying to understand now, that the Water Board has determined this to be a Tier 3 site, is that correct?
I just want to clarify that the only documented evidence we have of any communication between the appellant and the water board was in September. Apparently, there were telephone calls that were made, but we have no way to verify that. So the first documented evidence that we have of communication between the appellant and the water board is in mid-September, after the denial went out. The appellant has stated that he tried to call the water board and did not receive any call back, but we don't have any record of that.
So again, Peter, just to be sure we're understanding, the Water Board determined that this was to be a Tier 3 site.
Yes.
When?
In September of 2016. And there is we received, well, we never received anything. We received, as part of the appeal packet, a copy of an application that is signed by the owners and the registrant in October of 2016.
So as far as the requirements to meet the Tier 3 designation being fed back to our staff from the Water Board to indicate that the requirements are now fulfilled or being fulfilled have not been done, is that correct?
We did not receive anything up until our action to deny. I don't know what the status is currently regarding their status with the water board.
Thank you.
So for basically a year, you had no communication between an appellant and planning department until a denial was issued, and then communication started opening up, and documents were presented to you.
Yes. Okay, that's correct.
All right. Any other-
Mr. Chair, I have a question of counsel. Can I ask a question regarding? Mr. Williams, could you inquire of your client if he has any documentation as to any contact with the Water Quality Control Board via cell phone records, telephone records? We mentioned that there was some communication telephonically.
Yeah, so after the second incomplete notice of intent was sent to me, I began making phone calls to Michael Parker as instructed per the incomplete notice of intent. It says, please call this gentleman at this number if you have any questions regarding it. I left him several voicemails regarding the calls I'd had with the previous employee in 2016. No response. And then didn't get anything back. And honestly, I didn't know that it was that serious, until I received a denial notice from the planning department. Went in the very next day after I got it, spoke to Madeline, wrote an email. Then she tried to get a hold of Michael Parker for, I think it was over a week. Michael Parker finally called me and said, I understand you've been trying to get a hold of me. I'm sorry. I haven't returned your call. He's like, he told me he remembered one voicemail. He's like, I don't remember multiple, but it could have happened. I'm sorry. And then we began talking, and I discussed everything that happened with Trey Sorrell in the year prior. And as far as the water board was concerned at that point, I was free to move forward with application under Tier 3 and resume the process.
Okay, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Is there any evidence that you can produce documenting your phone bills that you made these calls? The question.
I don't know how, absolutely.
Sir, I'm not going to
willing
argue.
to submit
I'm telling you
my.
I need to
Okay,
tell you
sorry.
what I need to make a decision, and might be able to answer that. Any bills to indicate that you were in contact with the Water Quality Control Board from a period of when you received October 19th of 2016 to the denial by the Planning Commission? Any evidence or documentation that you did make those calls? And I guess you might want to talk to your attorney about that before you answer.
I mean, I don't have, I could absolutely
Well,
get phone records.
yeah, he can get his phone records, but Supervisor Oliveira, I think that the responses that you have a record of from the representatives of the Water Board indicate apology, that they recognize their delay. And I think one thing we need to keep this chronology, he got the second notice by mail at the beginning of July. So July, August, they deny on September 7th. He starts calling right away when he gets that second notice in July. Now, I mean, you either believe him on the basis of what he said and on the basis of how the water board members responded to him, or you don't, I guess. But there wasn't that much time that passed, and he was calling, and he finally got him on September 19th, but by that time, they'd already denied the application.
That's my point, Mr. Williams. I wish I had the luxury of being able to tell when somebody's being truthful or not being inaccurate. Documentation would help me make that decision. I'm a prior cop. I can't break that. I'm sorry. So if we can produce that information, that documentation, those phone calls, that would help me make my decision. I'll be quite honest. And counsel, would that be new information?
Yeah, anything, if you're looking to make your decision based on any piece of factual evidence that wasn't in front of the Planning Commission, then it should be kicked back to the Planning Commission for consideration. So if that's going to influence your decision, then yes, that would
Thank you,
send
counsel.
back.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
I would also ask, maybe Madeline knows whether, did Michael Parker ever say to you that I know he was delayed in getting back to you. Did he say in the course of the conversation that he had delayed in getting back to the applicant? That he had previously talked to him, or that he hadn't returned his calls?
He did not recall any multiple phone calls. I know he was on paternity leave during this time for a short period of time. There are other staff with the water board that are processing these. So I would have liked to have seen the appellant make more of an effort to contact the water board to, if he was having trouble getting in touch with one staff member, then try the next staff member. But Mr. Parker didn't recall having multiple messages from the appellant.
Well, but he did, when he couldn't get anybody to call him back, he called you.
He came to me,
And then
yes.
he found out he'd already been to you, right?
He came to me after he had received his denial letter, yes.
I don't know if you want to give us some additional time for him to produce his cell phone records to prove that he made the calls that he said he made, but that would be nice if that's what it comes down to.
Supervisor Mills?
I would have difficulty in accepting third-party information, what Mr. Parker did say or did not say, as he's not present in the hearing today. If that's something that is going to, help make a decision from someone, then I would ask that be brought forward and then be put back to the Planning Commission if they want to go that direction. But
Well, I'm addressing the applicant's phone call records to the water board.
no, I'm only referencing Mr. Parker's discussion with our staff. Thank you.
Supervisor Garamendi?
Thank you. Mr. Williams, just one more quick question. Has your client ever been convicted or accused of fraud, malfeasance, anything that would make us not trust his word? Okay, so I'm not sure why we wouldn't.
Yeah.
I can see plenty of reasons to lie, but I don't so sure I see a habitual liar sitting behind you. So
Well,
I take him at his word.
I agree with you, and I think this is where the common sense element comes in. If somebody goes to the trouble to get his landowners to fill out the second notice, isn't he going to send it in? Yes, he's going to send it in. Looking at the state of disarray, the volume of applications to the water board, could they have misplaced it? Certainly they could have misplaced it. I mean, to me, there's no harm, no foul. There hasn't been any injury here to the public, to the streams, to the process.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question to staff.
Yes.
Mr. Mauer, this application, pending this issue, has there been any inspections or further processing or anything to indicate that would disqualify this applicant other than this issue at this time?
There was an inspection done. They were given a 10-day notice to get building permits for some of the structures that have been erected. He got those permits.
Those permits were obtained and the building's completed,
As
signed
far as
off, do we
yes,
know?
There's not a final, final inspection or final sign-off by code enforcement, but we did look at the file. There was a notice of inspection and a notice that there were, I think, 4 hoop houses or 4 structures that needed, there was electrical permits and other permits, and he did get those permits, or he's applied for those permits. They've been issued. One was final, at least as of the date of our last communication with the building department.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, staff.
What date was that?
It's dated January 3rd of this year.
Of this year?
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Clapp.
I was involved in some litigation at one time that came down to when the phone call was made. This was approximately 10 years ago, fully represented me. And I contacted my provider. They said for a small fee I could get the copy of my phone calls at that day and time that I said I phoned. And actually when they found out it was for a litigation process, they waived the fee. And my whole case weighed on if I made contact at a certain time. And that did, so, and that was a way thing. I would be in favor if he, to send it back to the planning, if he could get records from his provider that he made those phone calls.
Okay. All right, I'm going to bring it back to the public members for rebuttal. Any member of the public, would you stand and speak?
My name is Jim Rott. I live at 2150 Gold Strike, which includes 2200. In other words, I'm the one of the land owners. And we had a deal with Calaveras water where we had to put in a valve, and he had put this valve in immediately without any questions. Any other actions I had with him were always honest and truthful. And if I asked him to do something here or there, he did it. And he's trying very hard to follow all the rules. Very hard. You guys got a question?
Any other members of the public?
Bill Wilson. It's another problem with the water board. And like our planning commission and our planning department was overwhelmed. Can you imagine Water Quality Control Board, the applications they received? Just from this county, some almost 1,000. From every other county that was allowing it, they had more than. We have 22,000 illegal grows in Humboldt, Trinity. they never bothered to apply. We're down to a conversation or a call or a time that somebody didn't get back to somebody or somebody did call somebody, and those records are available. And that man should be able to show that he either made those calls on those days and that time and tried to contact that person and that person wasn't available. I know we've called the Water Quality Control Board, and so kind of like our supervisors, we don't get response. Kind of like the sheriff's department around here. We do not get response from those phone calls. Whether you received them or not, I can show you logs on my phone. Thank you.
Bob Bowerman. So far today, what are we doing? Why are we making this brain surgery? I don't get it. These are farmers. I mean, paperwork. They're working on it. They've got it. They have it. They missed it. They're close. We're disrupting people's lives. There is a simpler way of doing this, and there's no wonder why everyone is backlogged. This is the reason. Red tape, paperwork, tons and tons of paperwork that goes nowhere, gets lost, all kinds of things are happening. And what we need to be focusing on is how do we make people's lives a little easier so they can get on with their lives. And we're doing just the opposite. We need to reconsider quite a few things here.
Any other public members?
I'm from District 4, and I've been listening with interest to everything that's been said. And I would like to comment this way. This country that I joined 30 years ago is built upon laws and paper. And if we decide as a board that because nobody can produce any documentation that this activity happened, you're in danger of setting a dangerous precedent that somebody else will come along and say, well, you didn't want paper in his case. And that is what I think we need to think about. We're going to a great deal of effort to make sure this is all done properly. And I think we should continue to do that. I would agree that if the people that want to prove that then they've got to supply the documentation. Nobody's saying that our activities here at the county administration, are without any kind of flaws, because they're people, and they do get overloaded. And because we're a poor county, maybe we don't have as many people working at the county as we ought to have. But facts of the matter are, we've still got to dot the I's and cross the T's. That's fair to everybody. Thank you.
Any other members of the public? If not, I'll close the hearing, bring it back to the board for discussion and deliberations.
Mr. Chair, I firmly believe that due process is warranted here and in every case that comes before this Board of Supervisors, our planning commissions, any governing body. And I'm a firm believer in getting all the most accurate information that you can before making decisions. I know that's not possible in all matters. And I understand that there is information that is new to this board that wasn't presented at the Planning Commission, but I have to commend the Planning Commission and the staff for doing the job they do. Nevertheless, I think that this situation warrants going back to the Planning Commission with the new information discussed here, and with any further new information that can be provided by the appellant where it's appropriate for the decision of the Planning Commission to review. If requested, I would make a motion to that effect. Thank you, Chair.
I would support that, too.
Supervisor Garamendi.
I'd like to make a counter motion that we uphold the appellant and overrule the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal. We have two different opinions about what was said. You are generally considered innocent until proven guilty. No one has proven otherwise. There's clearly miscommunication. Everybody's not on the same page. We have dealt with a lot of appeals over the last year, gentlemen, and some of them are pretty nasty stuff, and they're hurting the environment and their neighbors. We've got a paperwork issue here. We got somebody who's willing, despite our vote to ban, is willing to continue this process and try to bring it to resolution because they feel it's correct. If they thought they were gaming it, they would pack up and be gone. So I think that we should overturn the Planning Commission's denial, and I would make that counter motion.
Supervisor Mills, your light's on.
I think it's a timeline issue that we're dealing with here. We have an incomplete, an NOI that was done in September of 2016. We went until June of 2017, if I'm correct, that we had a second notice of an incomplete on that Tier 3. And then there was a flurry of activity in between where there was phone logs and email logs, et cetera. It comes down to who ultimately is at fault for not being able to get the information correctly into the application process. So I would support Supervisor Oliveira's decision here to allow everybody to bring forth all of the required information that they can bring forth so that there can be a complete review of the entire timeline process as it relates. But if our rules under 1795 say 165M4 that you've got to have certain things done by a certain date, that's an immovable object, and I would just like the Planning Commission to have an opportunity to review it to be sure that we haven't denied due process here.
Supervisor Oliveira, does your motion stand in light of what Supervisor Garamendi had to say?
Mr. Chair, it does stand, as stated by me.
And your second?
I would second that.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. We're going to take a 5-minute break before we get into the last. Madam Clerk.
Item 7 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial cannabis registration 2016-832 for Ortal Gabe at a site located at 5340 Hoover Road, McCullamy Hill, APN 016-024-057.
Is the appellant here? Town crier.
We did receive a request for continuance. It was included in the brief that was submitted to the board clerk and distributed to you earlier. It was dated January 12th. I don't know when.
They're on their way, Board. They didn't think you were going to get to them as fast as.
Okay, well, what we're going
to them, they're on their way.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is I have noticed that we need to go back into our closed session. It shouldn't be very long. So we're going to go into our closed session that we held open, and then we're going to return. It should take no more than 10 minutes. right, we're back. Madam Clerk.
Report of closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, conference with labor negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations. There was no reportable action taken.
Okay. Madam Clerk, you want to read item number 7 again for us?
Absolutely. Item 7 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commission's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial cannabis registration 2016-832 for Ortal Gabe at a site located at 5340 Hoover Road, McCullum Hill, APN 016-024-057.
I will open the hearing. And the appellant is here, representing the appellant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The appellant is not here. I am representing the appellant, and if I could beg upon the board prior to planning's portion of this hearing, I made a motion to continue. I'd like to see if the board would be inclined to contemplate that, because if you were so willing to grant the continuance, rather first than have planning go through their presentation, might be more time efficient.
What is the basis for the continuance?
So Mr. Gabe is not here. He had planned on being here. However, he had to tend to his ailing mom, who is back east. Reason that I asked for the continuance under those circumstances is he obviously would prefer to be here in person to answer questions like he was at the Planning Commission meeting. This hearing was originally scheduled in December. Planning contacted us on behalf of the board and requested a continuance so that the board at that time could contemplate other matters that were on its docket. So we agreed to that continuance, and we would ask in the event that Ortal is unable to be here if the board would consider giving us a continuance similar to the one that we were willing to give to the board.
I will poll the board on it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, before we have a poll, I have a question or two of council. Can we address that?
Yes.
I might have misunderstood. The reason that your client could not be here is because of a prior scheduled appointment?
More of a unscheduled family emergency. So he traveled back east, I think, Thursday morning. One other point that I failed to mention, that Mr. Gabe is not currently cultivating on this plot. He didn't cultivate all of 2017 on this plot because he was denied before, and he honored that. And I think that's also a relevant fact, so that a continuance wouldn't prejudice the county or his neighbors or anybody, because he in fact has not cultivated in 2017 and is not cultivating, if that makes any difference.
So this would be an emergency basis based on family issues?
That's correct.
All right. Mr. Chair, could you indicate or maybe ask if there's any neighbors or any people from the public that are here for this specific case?
Is there any public members here for this case?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
All right. Any other questions before we take a poll? I will start with Supervisor Clapp.
I know we've denied other people almost for the exact same thing, but I have no, I'm indifference to either way.
Supervisor Mills.
There have been times where we've moved forward with application, with appeals without the person being present. In this case, if there's information that you feel is germane or critical to your defense, then I would support.
Supervisor Olvera.
The nature of the client's absence fits in line with me. Also, the request made by the Planning Commission to postpone, for our reasons, I would be in support of a postponement.
Supervisor Garamendi.
I support postponement.
And I will support a postponement.
So you do need an actual vote instead of just a poll then?
Well, that was just a poll.
I'll make the motion.
See where we were, so I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make that motion to postpone it.
A motion by Supervisor Clapp. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Garamendi. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
I will go to public here. Just ask if there's any other discussion. Seeing none, before we take the vote, any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back, call for a vote. All in favor?
If I could, if we could continue it to a date certain, then that way everyone knows when that is, and it also eliminates the need to re-advertise. So we could continue it for 1 month until the third Tuesday of February, when we have our normal cannabis appeal hearings. Make that a part of the motion would be helpful.
That would be February 20th.
Jack, would you pull your second?
Yes.
I would modify my motion to put that date in.
Second.
Revised motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. See you in February.
Thank you for consideration. Have a great day.
So at this time would be, if there's any public comment continued from this morning that was after the 30-minute allotted time period.
So we'll open public comment back up. If you have not spoken earlier, you can speak now. 3 minutes.
Good day. Glenn Malliette, District 2. I've been a resident for close to 50 years now. And I also happen to be a commercial cannabis registrant. I've sent you all a letter trying to document how not all sites represent a threat or condition of nuisance. And I tried to plead with you to take that into account by not adopting a ban. But we have a ban. Some will declare victory and feel that their property values have been supported. The value of their rentals are kept high. Other of us wonder who's going to stop the illegal growing. Who is going to stop the people that have purposely grown thousands of marijuana plants immediately above my water supply spring? This is not theoretical. This has already happened. Who is going to stop someone from doing this again? Why have you created a ban with a giant black hole? The black hole being no way to fund it. This is completely irresponsible. Government should not behave in this manner. You have an obligation to all of us, not just those that do not like marijuana. Unfortunately, I think this is going to result in a lot more problems for you. We all want to see you move on to other issues. But by doing this action, you have embroiled yourself in this issue for perhaps years to come. Please take all factors into consideration when you make your decisions, and not just your preconceived ideas. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Tyler Daly. I'm the owner of Gold Mountain Farms in District 2. I'd like to start today by reading a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., seeing he also celebrated his life yesterday. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. Pretty significant, gentlemen. I'd like to thank Jack and Mike for being true politicians, for being able to come to the board and negotiate and be willing to work and meet in the middle. I couldn't ask for more from a politician. and I wish that all politicians were like that. There are members of this board that have no respect for people in this community or the departments of this community. I mean, the planning department, the building department, the sheriff's department, the tax collector's office. All these people have come to you. All of them have come to you. And all of them have put a tremendous amount of work in the last 2 years for you to turn around and basically say that all their work was for nothing. That's sad. You should be ashamed of yourself, Mr. Tuffanelli. You should be ashamed of yourself, and I want you to know that. I want you to know that you are going to have to live with this decision. And it's your baby, and you're going to own it. Thank you.
Dr. Prapana Randall Smith, District 3. I hold a doctorate in educational leadership. I studied and lived leadership for years. I know what good leadership looks like, and let's talk about, briefly, let's debrief what we saw the other day. Going back 2 years, we've heard slander in here. We've heard citizens be accused of being criminals and lowlifes. We've heard Mr. Clapp say he doesn't want those kinds of people living here. We saw Mr. Clapp slander one of your constituents, Gary. We've heard vitriol and anger and hatred. I don't know where it all comes from. Years ago, I went to India. We tried to go to a temple, and they wouldn't let me in. Do you know what they told me? You are not Hindu, they said. The priest pinched his skin on his arm and said, you are not Hindu. I walked away with two interesting thoughts. One is, for a white man, a white American, to be discriminated against, he's got to come to India. It was crazy for me. It was a terrible experience. And I thought to myself, no American white man will ever experience that kind of bigotry in America. Prohibition from the beginning was inherently racist. Marijuana was a pejorative term dreamed up by Harry A. Anslinger to make white people fear and hate Hispanics and blacks in the South. Your legacy of your vote has its roots in overt, institutionalized racism. We've heard trade slander. I believe that what we've heard is trade slander. We've read trade libel. It's trade bigotry. People just don't like people that are in the industry. They don't have any reason for it. They just don't like them. And when this body allows that kind of public discussion and says nothing, you are culpable. When we are slandered and nothing is said, well, actually, Mike, this isn't a slam on you, but however, I'll say this. When Mr. Claps yelled out, sign the recall, there should have been something done about that. You're not allowed to campaign from that seat. You're misusing public funds when you do that. And when Bonnie was slandered, you should have stopped the meeting. You should have looked over at county council and said, what do we got to do to censor this kind of behavior, to stop it? It's atrocious. It should never happen in a space like this. I'm thoroughly disgusted. You own it now, Gary. What you got coming, Mr. Mills, you guys own it, and you deserve everything you got coming to you. And it's sad. It's pathetic. Shouldn't have happened.
Any other public comments? If not, I'll close public comments. And we will stand adjourned. No, nothing on the agenda.